Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Jason Long, and I lead the networking organization in the Amazon Physical Retail Technology Group. So in physical retail technology inside Amazon was essentially the autonomous retail solutions that we developed for Amazon Go. And we have turned that into a product that we offer to other people called Just Walk Out. And so our Just Walk Out stores, now you can find the Amazon Go stores, but you can also find third-party stores that are using that same technology. So if you haven't been to an Amazon Go store and you have some time, there's several within a few blocks of here. So I would encourage you to go look at that. But my teams are responsible for all of the networking that makes that Just Walk Out technology possible. So today, I'm going to be talking about the vision for DENT. So along with my role at Amazon, I'm also the chairman of the DENT governing board. And so I will be able to talk from kind of the DENT project perspective as to what our vision is, what we're setting out to do, and where we're going from there. So DENT was something that we started back in 2019. I was one of the original founders of DENT, and we sort of came together with a series of other founding members to try to solve some problems. So in the physical retail space, that distributed edge use case is something that wasn't well solved prior to DENT within the open source ecosystem. And so that's really sort of what we decided to do. So before we jump into that though, I figured it would be good for me to kind of talk a little bit about what it is that led to the name of DENT. So many people have asked me, most open source projects, they try to have kind of an acronym or something like that. And DENT is not an acronym. And it's, that's the consistent thing I say all the time to people when they ask. It is actually in honor of one of my favorite everyman characters from literature. So DENT is an operating system or a network operating system for every man. So we decided to name it after an everyman character in literature. So it's named after Arthur Dent from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And so you'll notice that we use Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy references throughout. Version 1 was named Arthur. DentOS version 2 was named Beeblebrox. I don't know if we have a C name yet for version 3, but generally we try to pick some sort of Hitchhiker's Guide theme for the different release names. So that's where DENT came from, and it will continue to do that. So if anyone ever asks you, if you're wondering why DENT, it's because it's supposed to be a NOS for everyone else, not just the data centers, because that was really the key sort of differentiator that we found when we started looking at starting DENT was that most of the solutions out there were really targeted towards the data centers if you wanted to go into the disaggregated space. And that we could maybe figure out how to apply that for our use case, but in the end it wasn't a great fit. And so we said, okay, well, what about all of the other use cases that aren't large data centers, and what if those use cases want to take advantage of disaggregated networking? And so it's the NOS for every man is the idea behind it. So now that you know why we call DENT DENT, let's talk a little bit about what it is. So first and foremost, DENT is an open source ecosystem that's designed to be able to enable the transition to disaggregated networking for end users that haven't previously been able to do that. So we started with the distributed edge use case because primarily that's the use case that our physical retail technology needed. And so it was a good fit for us to say, okay, let's take some of the lessons learned that we've learned at Amazon from building large data centers and trying to drive the state-of-the-art of networking from that space. Let's apply that into the distributed edge. Let's simplify things as much as possible, and really be able to then, with our founding partners, create this ecosystem that allows other people that are also in that distributed edge use case get the same benefits of disaggregated networking. And so, when we started DENT, we looked at these different solutions that were out there. And what we found was that there were two key problems that a lot of them had. The first was that a lot of those products were really targeted to the data center, like I mentioned. But the other one was that for those that weren't targeted to data centers, they were locked into a single vendor solution. And so you could sort of get the benefits of disaggregation, but not really, because you had to buy your hardware from this one place, or you had to buy an ASIC from one particular vendor, or you had to buy this one particular commercial NOS that would work with the boxes that you wanted to use. And so really what the key to the beginning of DENT was about, how do we build a community that will allow these edge use cases, including our Just Walk Out stores, to be able to get these benefits of disaggregated open source networking from a variety of different industry solutions. And so that's really what drove kind of these 4 points of our mission, was to try to figure out how we could build that ecosystem that would allow that. And so when we talk about an ecosystem, really that's exactly what we mean. And we're looking to try to create a community that can engage all of the different parts of that ecosystem. And so we partnered together with our founding members, which was Marvell, Delta, and EdgeCore, who are here today, and we'll be talking about their use to be able to create this community. And then since then, we've had several other members who've joined us, members like Sartura and Keysight that you'll hear from as well. And together, we've been able to work over the last 3 years to build this ecosystem and this open source community to the point where at Amazon, we now have this deployed into production. And you'll hear more about that in the next half hour, so I won't spend any time talking about that. But when we talk about what does that ecosystem mean, really what we wanted to do was find a way to engage all the different parts of the networking value chain. And so, that means that we need to be able to pull in the different silicon vendors and offer, opportunities for vendor diversity in the silicon space. We need to be able to pull in, OEM and ODMs to be able to offer choice in that space as well. System integrators, service integrators, end users. All of these different groups all have a different sort of set of needs that they can have served through the open source community, but they also have a certain set of contributions and skills and best practices that they can bring to the table that will allow the DENT community to be vibrant and to be sort of self-perpetuating over time as each one brings their unique strengths. And so on top of that, not only is DENT an ecosystem, but it's a series of different components. It's not just a NOS. It's not just hardware. It's a place to collaborate openly on all of the different parts of the process that are required to be able to realize this main benefit of how do you get Linux-based disaggregated networking into edge deployments. And so that includes the 3 main areas that we've been investing over the last 3 years, which is open hardware, open software, and an open testing framework. But it also includes things like documentation and training and integration assistance and support and control planes and other software as well that would be required for the edge end users to be able to get the most out of a disaggregated solution. Because at the end of the day, disaggregation provides both an amazing opportunity, but it also brings with it a sort of different level of effort that you have to provide. And so DENT is designed as a project to be able to allow collaboration on all of those different components so that we can make it possible for end users to be able to get these benefits that we've been seeing in other industry verticals. And so as the project continues to grow, we'll continue to add these different components into the open source offerings that we have, whether it be additional code, whether it be new sub-projects. DENT is an umbrella project, so we have the ability to add sub-projects so that if there's a management sub-project or something else, we can be able to offer that, whether it's additional end-user use cases, new test cases, certification program, things like that will all be able to be added over time. But in the near term, we've been focusing on really making sure that we have robust, high-quality hardware, robust, high-quality software that's been tested fully and has been proven through at-scale deployments. And so from a technical perspective, we talked a little bit about the mission of DENT and kind of what makes up the community. And so when we look at the technical solution, we'll dive into the details a little bit later, but what drives the choices that we've been making from a technical perspective in the community? And these are really the guiding principles that we've set up for our community. So first of all, it really kind of comes from this foundation of what are the main benefits that are on offer for someone who wants to take advantage of disaggregated networking. And I think really for me, it came down to three big things. One, it enables cost reduction. Two, it allows for a unified control plane across all of your infrastructure. And three, it allows you to improve your operational posture. And so the guiding principles for DENT are really designed to kind of enhance all three of those areas. And so by utilizing a Linux-first approach and leveraging things like networking components inside the kernel and switch dev and other Linux-based projects, we're able to unify the control plane for our networks and our other infrastructure across common existing tool sets that are available today. And then, Linux system administration is something that is sort of a solved problem. There's a lot of very robust tools out there, and a lot of end users have a lot of experience with those different tools. And by taking this sort of Linux-first approach and trying as much as possible to use all of the sort of in-kernel components and the existing user space tool sets, it enables us to see that sort of unified control plane come into existence. The next big thing that we talk about is, how do we go about making sure that we can reduce cost? And I think one of the big areas for that is that we can, bring about the ASIC diversity and silicon diversity inside the switch. But a key to that is you have to have software that can drive the different hardware components. And so by learning to sort of use the Linux-first approach, we're trying to find a way to change the mental model for how we treat ASICs to match other hardware devices inside the Linux environment today. And so that's where SwitchDev comes into play. That's where trying to leverage open drivers and open Linux-based solutions provides the key. And then kind of the next big thing is simplifying abstractions. And so a key component at the edge is that there's usually a lot of cost pressures, and we want to be able to reduce cost as much as possible. And one of the things that I found when I was looking for options for my stores was that a lot of the open solutions that were out there, or the disaggregated solutions, were built first and foremost for the data center. And so they made some assumptions around what resources you would have available in your switches. And they made it difficult to be able to cost optimize that hardware down to the floor. And so by simplifying the abstractions and trying to reduce the amount of overhead that exists and keep it as simple as possible, we're able to cost down our hardware, to kind of the extreme. And we can sort of play with a lot of levers to be able to put DENT in really interesting places that require a much lighter weight installation. But because we don't have a lot of abstractions, we don't have a lot of sort of additional constructs inside user space, we're able to play with that a lot. And there may be some use cases that want that extra power. And what this does is maybe your goal isn't to cost down your box directly, but maybe you're going to achieve your cost reduction by merging use cases together in a single piece of hardware, and you can use the extra compute capacity that you now have available on your switch to be able to do other workloads. And so that's sort of one of the big benefits that we've been seeing at Amazon through DENT, and a reason why we try to drive the simplification of abstractions. And then another benefit that brings is that it allows you to be able to more easily support your switches. So a lot of times prior to our move into DENT, whether it was commercial disaggregated solutions or it was OEM solutions, at the end of the day, a lot of the components under the hood were black boxes that you had to go to the vendor to ask for help with. And so what we've been able to do through DENT is be able to open that up. And so now with an open Linux first approach, all the source code's available to us. We can go debug from the very bottom layer everything that's happening in our network and be able to have a much more robust operational posture as we go forward. And that's largely because there are very limited numbers of abstractions, and so you don't have to try to trace exactly what's happening in a particular root cause analysis through multiple layers quite to the same degree. So at the end of the day, the next big thing, like I mentioned in the last slide, is really trying to drive an ecosystem that can hit all of the different parts of the value chain. And by doing this, it allows all of these benefits to kind of work their way through each of the different parts of the networking supply chain. And so we can be able to enable end users to use disaggregated networking that didn't necessarily have that opportunity in front of them, which then in turn enables the supply chain to be able to sell into those spaces, and it creates this virtuous cycle. And so that's sort of a common guiding principle that we have. And the other big thing that does by building this sort of robust community with all of the different aspects of the supply chain is it makes sure that not only do we have the code available to go debug our own problems, but we also have the ability to go to a community that's a broad-based community with a lot of experience to be able to try to get help when we need it. And we don't have sort of a single gatekeeper like you would have in a vendor-supported, whether it's a commercial disaggregated product or an OEM product before. So, and I think to kind of the last big benefit is that we really want to stay focused on driving this value as fast as possible and allowing us to get to market as quickly as we can. And so in order to do that, we've really focused on solving the problem of the distributed enterprise edge use case first. And then we'll look to expand it from there to other use cases as appropriate. But this has enabled us to really narrow in on the features that are required at the distributed edge. And we don't have to do the kitchen sink of the enterprise feature set right out of the gate. And that's worked really well for all of my stores that run Just Walk Out technology, because we limited the particular features they needed. And I think that that's a common trend that we're seeing in the distributed edge use cases, is that they generally are trying to limit the amount of unique features they use to have a more robust solution. So with that, I think, as we take those guiding principles and we turn them into very specific objectives, DENT's primary objective right now is to standardize the silicon and switch software so that there's a common interface within Linux to be able to program them. And in practice, what that's meant for us is that we've really started to invest in the kernel component switch dev to be able to do that. So switch dev is already in the kernel, it's natively supported, and we work with the community to be able to have switch dev drivers in the kernel that allow us to program the ASICs on our hardware, so that all happens. And then that allows us to use native Linux interfaces and the existing Linux tooling today to be able to kind of drive this flow. And so you can start in a user space app that you might be familiar with. Let's say it's routing and you want to operate in FRR. FRR would send messages down into the kernel, then SwitchDev would pick those up and send those down into the ASIC to be able to do the programming of routes or whatever. And that allows for that kind of seamless flow in a way that is familiar and already operating. And from a strategic perspective, we broke the project down into 4 phases to be able to accomplish this. And we've been really heavily invested in phase 1 in making it work for distributed edge use cases. And we're sort of right at the stage now with our 3.0 release that's planned for January, where we're going to start adding some of the features in, like IPv6 parity with IPv4 and some port isolation features that will allow us to start addressing some additional use cases potentially. And then in parallel, we've been working on some of the things related to phase 3. So several of the DENT members have created support programs that you can go to the dent.dev website to find out more information about. And that will allow an end user who is interested in either integrating it with an existing solution or needs some help with support after deployment to be able to have that support that they need. Let's see. So I think we'll sort of pivot now to talk about how does DENT apply to these particular markets? And so with the distributed edge being our first primary focus area, what does that look like? And why are we focused on the distributed edge? So we'll apply this very specifically to Amazon and how Amazon looks at DENT in our space in the next talk. But at a really high level, The enterprise edge is sort of very well matched with what DENT can provide, because generally speaking, a key component of this distributed edge is there's massive amounts of data that is being sort of moved around by lots of different sensor devices to different compute devices. Those devices may be on the edge, they may be in the cloud, and all of that requires that you can stream data, that a lot of it may require PoE. There's a ton of the different sort of processing use cases that end up coming into play. And DENT allows us to be able to simplify the network infrastructure and then have the sort of highly functional network that can provide this capacity, can provide power, can provide data connectivity, but then also has the ability to provide a unified management layer and to be able to provide enough overhead or spare overhead on your switch that you could run additional workloads on there. You could process some of the data right there on the switch, or you could run some control software to be able to talk to something like an electronic shelf label or something. So it kind of integrates really well with that need to be able to have all of these different sensors on the edge that need to send data to lots of different places. And so when we look at retail specifically, I think retail is a new ground for innovation in the distributed edge. And retail companies are used to operating with sort of centralized policies that need to be managed in all of their distributed locations. And now, with both prior to COVID and now especially after COVID, there's this huge shift of a lot of new technology into retail that increases the amount of sensors that are in stores, that increases the need for data, and that increases the amount of processing that's going on. And so if you think about a typical retail store today, you have shelves, you have product, but then behind the scenes, you maybe have IP cameras, you have electronic shelf labels, you have sensors that are either, if it's an autonomous retail store, you've got weight sensors and whatnot, you have point of sale systems, and those might be in large stores or they might be in really small stores. And all of these different sensors need to be able to connect to the network. A lot of them stream all their data back up to the cloud, and we need a solution for the network in these stores that can meet these needs. And so this just kind of highlights some of that. So you've got all of these different sensor types, whether it's digital cameras, maybe it's HVAC systems and building control systems, and all of that's going to be used for any number of particular customer experiences. Everything from the extreme of a just walk out type store where the customer can just go in and pick up what they want and leave, to even grab and go sales, or maybe even inventory management or customer heat map tracking, and things like that are all driving this sort of explosion of sensors on the edge. And so DENT provides a cost-effective way to be able to provide this incredibly powerful network into these stores that need connectivity and power for all of these different device types. And so on top of the ability to provide that cost effectiveness, it also provides the ability to unify a bunch of the different parts of the management chain. And so you can look at how you harden your OSs, you can look at how you test your systems, you can look at all of the different hardware that's available, and where applicable, you can actually unify hardware components and you can test them all and you can run similar OSs. At Amazon, we actually have DENT deployed not just on our switches, but on IoT gateways and on authentication devices. And it's allowed us to be able to unify this management, unify our testing, and really get to market a lot faster. And today, DENT has all of the L2 and L3 features that you would need to be able to support all these different device types. And then as an open community, we can continue to add more and more features. We can add more and more use cases on top of all of that. And so retail is just one example of the markets that DENT makes sense in. There are many others, whether it be hospitality or warehousing, it might be oil and gas or education. So there's lots of other places where this particular set of requirements comes into play. And really it comes down to, are there unique client devices that are distributed out to the edge that need a lot of bandwidth, that need high availability, that need potentially the ability for mobility, and that you would want to have sort of centralized management and centralized policies. And so you want to be able to kind of unify that across the board, and DENT will allow you to take the infrastructure that enables all of that and then build on top of that, use the fact that it's just Linux is the thing I tell my team all the time. It's just Linux. So you can use any tool that works in Linux, you can use on DENT. And in fact, when you get to, when we talk about the features, one of the great things that I love about DENT is that oftentimes people will ask me, well, can you do this in DENT? And the question is usually, well, can you do it in Linux? Because if you can do it in Linux, it probably works. If we don't have it on the feature page for DENT, it's just because we haven't tested it yet. There's a pretty darn good chance it's going to work if it works in Linux. And the community can go try that all on their own. So I think just to kind of reiterate the benefits that we see in DENT, it drives reduced integration time, it drives wide access to hardware, it allows us to support the existing Linux tools, and ultimately have kind of this unified approach to management. And really it just comes down to, it's simple. Like, it allows us to get to market quickly. We started DENT in December of 2019. We had the first release in December of 2020. We had our first production deployments in January of 2021. And since then, we've been growing, and we now have thousands of DENT devices out in the field in production, and we continue to iterate. We released version 2 of DENTOS in March of 2022, and we're getting ready to release version 3, I think, in January of next year. So it's that sort of unified set and that approach of just Linux first that's allowed us to move really fast in that. And this just kind of speaks to the components that I talked about. I already mentioned a lot of these already, so I won't spend a lot of time here. But again, it's about DENT as an ecosystem that tries to drive all of the pieces you need to be able to successfully deploy disaggregated networks in edge environments or other non-data center spaces, basically. And so this is just kind of a refresh on the sort of value prop of disaggregated networks. It allows us to take the legacy unified approach, split it apart, do what we want with our OS, do what we want with our hardware, and then ultimately build a lot of applications that can do whatever we want them to do running on top of our switches. So I mentioned DENTOS a couple of times. You'll hear a little bit more about it, so I won't spend a lot of time here right now. But we do have DENTOS. DENTOS is essentially a reference operating system, so you can download the binary and you can run it. But DENT is an umbrella project. It's more than just that operating system. And so there can be other operating systems under DENT. The key is Linux first, simplify abstractions. That's why we have those guiding principles to drive really what makes sense to fit under the DENT umbrella. And as a Linux Foundation project, there's lots of ways that you can get involved. There's lots of ways that the community comes together. We have weekly TSC meetings. We have a governing board. So all the normal ways you can engage with the open source project. So I would encourage you, as you listen to the rest of the talks today, if you are interested in finding out more, talk to any of us. A bunch of my team are here, but then we also have other members of the community, or attend a TSC meeting, or reach out to the mailing lists, all of those things. So I think with that, does anyone have any questions for me?